Okay, sir. మీరు స్టార్ట్ చేయండి సార్. ఫస్ట్ ఇంట్రడక్షన్ తోటి ఫస్ట్ జాంకీ గారు ప్రార్థన మొదలుపెట్టి తర్వాత మీరు ఇంట్రడక్షన్తో స్టార్ట్ చేయండి. అంటే సెకండ్ పార్ట్ కదండి ఇంగ్లీష్ వెర్షన్లో. మీరు జాంకీ గారు.
హరి ఓం. నమో భగవతే శ్రీ జ్ఞానానంద సద్గురు పరబ్రహ్మణే నమః. అందరికీ హృదయపూర్వక నమస్కారాలు. తుషారధారా పిహితాంతరాసు హిమాద్రి గంభీరధరీషు నిత్యం దిగంబరో మణిసప్తసేతాః యమీయాస్తే స్థిరధీ సమాధౌ శ్రీమత్పరమహంసాయ శ్రీ జ్ఞానానందయోగినే పరివ్రాజకవర్యాయ ఆచార్యాయ నమోస్తుతే. హరి ఓం. అజ్ఞానం అవిద్యాయత్కృపతో వినశ్యతః తందేవం స్వగురం నిత్యం శ్రీ జ్ఞానానందం నమామ్యహం. దిక్కాలాచ్చ నవచ్చిన్నం నిష్కళం యన్నిరంతరం నిర్వికల్పం పరాత్మానం నిర్వికారం చ నిర్గుణం అనంతం సచ్చిదానందం అవాంగ్మానసగోచరం అద్వయం స్వప్రకాశ బ్రహ్మతత్వముపాస్మహే. హరి ఓం. నమో భగవతే శ్రీ జ్ఞానానంద సద్గురు పరబ్రహ్మణార్పణమస్తు.
Hello, good evening to everyone and good morning to North Americans. Today's topic is Philosophy of Yoga, lecture given by Swami Jnanananda at Agra University in the year 1937. Allow me to briefly introduce the author, Swami Jnanananda. Swami Jnanananda, based on the teachings of Lord Buddha, Bhagavad Gita, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa Vivekananda, renunciated all the worldly affairs and went into Himalayas doing intense tapas for realization. At a very young age of 21, and obtained Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the highest state of Samadhi, in only 3.5 years of intense yoga sadhana. Then he wrote a masterpiece, Purna Sutras on Bhojapatras in Himalayas. Then to publish that Purna Sutras, he went to Europe, and there he also gave 100 to 150 lectures on Indian philosophy. There he met a physicist who encouraged him to take up physics, science, which he did. He learned the language and went and obtained Doctor of Science degree and PhD degrees in Europe, and then United States, and then returned to India in 1947. This lecture was given in 1937 when Swami returned to India after he attained his Doctor of Science degree, because he had an infection on his hand as a result of an accident in Germany. So during that time, he was invited to Benares Hindu University by Pandit Madan Mohan Malaviya, who was the Vice Chancellor, to attend the convocation of that university. Then he represented the university to Indian Science Congress, which was held in Calcutta. There he met Professor Agarwal, who is a brilliant mathematician, and he has invited Swamiji to conduct a seminar in Agra University on physics. There, Swamiji conducted a seminar on X-ray physics. There, he was requested to give an extension lecture on philosophy of yoga, and that is the subject of today's session. This lecture is published in a book form, which comprises of almost 80 pages, and in a small print that is, you have access to Saint and Scientist book. In a small print, it goes about 30 pages. In order to understand, make it easier, please allow me to give an overview of all this about this lecture. The word philosophy means, it is philosophy. The word philosophy is commonly misunderstood. So what philosophy means, it is actual means, it is from a Greek word, it is love of wisdom. It is what it means, what it is it is a rational and methodical consideration of human existence and experience. So it is a rational and methodical thought process to evaluate the human existence and experience. So that's what word philosophy means. And then what is yoga? Yoga is a word very frequently used, especially these days, because now we have Yoga Day, where we all go into your asanas and we all practice different forms of yoga so that to control our mind, to give us some peace, and to have a better life. In order to understand the actual meaning of yoga, by yoga in English, yoga means restraint of subjective modifications. That is the sentence Swamiji used in Purna Sutras. The Telugu and Sanskrit translation of that is Chitta Vritti Nishedha. Chitta Vritti Nishedham is yoga or Nirodha. Not Nishedha, it's Nirodha. Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Okay, what is Chitta Vritti Nirodha? What is subjective modifications? Chitta is a form of faculties. How do you get this chitta? How do you get these faculties? The faculty is our mind. This mind, our body, the present body has Jnanendriyas or Indriyas. Jnanendriyas meaning the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the skin. By these Jnanendriyas, our Jnanendriyas transmit through our nerve impulses If it is through the eyes, through the retina, through the optic nerve, to the brain, and subsequently transformed into the mind stuff. And this mind stuff or the faculties are manas, buddhi, ahankara, and chitta. So these 5 forms of mind give us the picture that we see or we hear or we feel. So what is manas is just, it gives us to see a form. Then buddhi gives it names and forms. The ahankara, the ego, makes it is a faculty whereby it gives, by the mind, it declares to establish it is ownership, whether it is mine or it is different. And then the chitta analyzes, and depending on our own faculty, it modifies all we learn from the other forms of mind stuff. So this is chitta. Then what is vritti? Vritti is, in English, it is subjective modification. What is subjective modification? So, when the subject, meaning whoever the subject is, who is trying to grasp a thing or see a thing, then with the aid of our body, that is through Jnanendriyas, and through our mind, we form a five ways of grasping it. These are subjective modifications. These are modifying through our intellect. In other words, if we see a thing, if we see an object, and our object modifies into vrittis, the subjective modifications. So whatever we see, and these are the modifications of the subject, not by object itself. So these vrittis, so these vrittis, so getting back to our definition of yoga, it is chitta vritti nirodha. So we have to restrain these modifications. Why do we have to restrain these modifications? In order to, unless we know this entire universe is the modifications by our mind. In order to obtain the true knowledge, you have to restrain these subjective modifications. That is yoga method. Why yoga method? In our philosophy, the Indian philosophy, there are 6 ways of our philosophical systems. One of the ways is yoga method as enunciated by Patanjali Maharshi. That is yoga darsana. There are other ways like Sankhya system and other Mimamsa system, and also Vedanta systems, Vaiseshika systems, and Nyaya system, Niyama systems. So one of the systems is yoga systems. By restraining our subjective modifications through different yogas, which we'll go into detail as we go forward, then we'll go into samadhi state, and then realization happens. So one can ask why we should do this, because there are 2 ways of looking at it. By practicing yoga, what are the benefits for our regular householders like you and me, there are two benefits. Number one is health benefits. Number two, peace and satisfaction. For a regular sadhana at a very high level, it is possible to obtain realization. What is realization? Why one should even attempt to do that? That will go through periods of many years, and also possibly in many lives. So that is the actual introduction to the word philosophy of yoga. So what is this lecture is all about? So by philosophy, we define it as a knowledge, a wisdom of yoga. So yoga itself is a way of realization. So we use the word yoga. So by this lecture, we want to understand what that word yoga means, why you are practicing yoga, what is the goal of it, what is actually, what is the theory behind it, what is the practice of it, and what is the goal of it. So that is the topic of this lecture. And this lecture is given by a Swami who at a very young age realized the absolute through intense yoga sadhana, and then went and studied science so that he is able to synthesize both Vyakta and Avyakta, the both scientific aspect of yoga as well as yogic part of the realization. So he is in a unique position to synthesize these and give us the brief review of that. So he is starting with this, with the word sisters and brothers. Interestingly, that is what Swami Vivekananda did in his Chicago lecture when he was in USA, which stunned the audience, the world audience, with that remarkable address as sisters and brothers. Swamiji is an admirer and follower of Swami Vivekananda. So, as I already said, as I briefly reviewed about yoga philosophy, philosophy is a vast subject. The PhDs are conferred and awarded on philosophy. As I already said, philosophy does not mean a form of religion. Philosophy used in a very loose terms. You can use the word philosophy as your own philosophy. In other words, you can say, my philosophy to life is this. My philosophy to politics is this. My philosophy to life is this. So there is Greek philosophy, there is Hindu philosophy, there is Christian philosophy, or there is anything philosophy as long as it is analyzing the thought and process. So in the yoga, in the psychology, in the philosophy itself, there are many branches, including metaphysics, the cosmology, meaning the doctrine of the universe, ontology, doctrine of being, the state of being after death, eschatology, and ethics, morality, as well as the most important part is as we go next. And also the pluralistic idealism means this is the there is more than one correct logic. So there is pluralistic idealism of Greek philosophy, Indian philosophy, and all that. So then, one of the most important part of this branch of philosophy is epistemology. So if you please go up. That epistemology is a branch of a philosophy. It is the branch to evaluate the knowledge. How is this knowledge we get? What kind of knowledge, how it is possible to attain the knowledge? So knowledge is several ways. Knowledge we get through study of the books, that is Swadhyaya. And then the knowledge we get, we meaning the Indians, the Indian philosophy and our Indian knowledge is gotten a lot by our Maharishis, and our philosophies is passed through from Maharishis to Maharishis, and then by the great writings of Vedas and Upanishads, and also Bhagavad Gita and such, Ramayana and all those great books that we all know. But here the knowledge is analytical way of studying the yoga philosophy. So this is what he says. This sentence is important, so I will read this for your consideration. The study of the epistemological principles in so far as they have direct bearing upon yoga will be of intense value both for a clear and thorough grasp of philosophy of yoga for its systemic practical study. So by the end of this will take about, I am estimating about 6 of these sessions to complete this lecture. So hopefully by the end of our sessions, so when you hear the word yoga, then we understand what Swamiji is teaching us, so that we understand that word yoga, what it means. So what is epistemology? The epistemology is the theory and the method and grounds of knowledge. So it is the subject which deals with the how knowledge is possible, what is the meaning of knowledge, what is the nature of knowledge, what is the limits of knowledge, how far our knowledge of the objective existence is valid, and that is to say how far our knowledge and the objective existence is in agreement with the actual existence in itself. So it is, we are studying the existence and the knowledge of the existence. So we are studying the knowledge of existence. So how is it possible? Is it valid, whatever we are learning? So we are analyzing trying to analyze in a philosophical way of what is this? What is this existence? So what is existence in a simple way? As he is saying next, if you perceive an object, let us say, I'm looking at an object like a desk in front of me. If I close my eyes, the object disappears. So although the object is there, but the fact that it is not there when I close my eyes, that means the object that I'm perceiving is perceived by my senses. And the object I'm seeing is smooth from side to side and from corner to corner. However, if I look at that with a magnifying glass, it is not smooth anymore. And it is uneven. It has furrows. And it goes deep ups and downs. So it is not smooth anymore. So whatever I see, perceiving through my faculties is different than what I am actually seeing through a different way. Again, it is not smooth anymore. And again, let us go to at night time. Let us look at the sky. When we look at the sky, we are seeing the stars as a small specks, tiny little things. And these tiny little things are not tiny little anymore. So with the vast knowledge we have attained through astronomy, and again, please note, Swamiji wrote this, delivered this lecture in 1937. Since that time, we have learned enormously in the during that period. So when Swamiji delivered this lecture, there is no Hubble telescope. Man did not go to moon. He didn't have all this information. Even then, he was arguing with the knowledge, the scientific knowledge that was present at that time. So he is telling us, when you look at the sky and what you are seeing, a little bit of tiny speck of stars, they are huge. And look at our sun. The sun is actually, if you just put what it takes in the sun, 1 million Earths, we can put it in the sun. That how big sun is. It looks like a small rounded ball when we look at the sun. However, the sun looks much bigger than those stars. However, those stars that we are looking in the sky, they are millions of times bigger than even our sun. So what is happening is, and those things that we are seeing at a distance are not small. So what we are perceiving through our faculties is far from the actual truth. So what we are seeing from the twinkle, twinkle little star is actually huge. Not only that, and the light that is emitted from that star actually starts at the light travels at an enormous speed of about 120 miles a second. And it takes some of the stars, it takes millions of years to reach us. In other words, the light that we are seeing from that star has started its journey millions of years ago. So what we are seeing, what we are perceiving through is far from complete. So we are learning from the scientists and astronomers that those little stars are not little. And another simple example Swami gives, that one person who he gives an example, who's stout as himself, when he starts to walk away from him, as he walks away, and this becomes smaller, and he walks to a small distance, even at a straight line, eventually he disappears. So it is the perception is, that is, so what is happening is, what we are seeing this is due to sense perception. So the way we are seeing either the stars or the sun or the moon as small objects, or the person who is moving away from us is smaller is through our sense perception. Again, he is giving the example of Kama Bernicius, which is million times larger than what even our sun. And the star, it's called Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse. That is an Arabic word for a star which is close to us, and it is huge. And this thing, and it looks like a small sun, but it is huge. And that is again an example of what our sense perception. So, for a layperson like me, when I look at a star, and it looks a small speck in the beautiful night sky. For a scientist and an astronomer taught us that is not true. He taught us that is millions and millions of miles away, and it's a lot bigger than even beyond our even imagination. That's small. So that is a different perception by the astronomer, and by that knowledge that we got, we the layperson, I myself has gotten a knowledge that knowledge that is not true. Again, my sense perception as that person moving away is not small, but I know from my analysis that it is the same person as he was near me. So it is this thing. So there are two things that two words that we need to Swamiji uses, we need to understand. One is sense perception, sense world, sense ego. Two words, one is sense ego and the other one is super ego. By the way, if you Google these two words, you probably will not get in the dictionary or somewhere. Maybe there is somewhere, but I couldn't find it. So let us spend a little few times to understand what Swamiji is talking to us. One is sense ego, another is super ego. Sense ego, let's go back. We brought the word ego before. Ego is a part of our mind, our faculty, where we define that it is a peculiar, it is a form of our intellect, whereby during our consciousness, we can figure out what is mine or what belongs to me or not, we can accept. It gives us the ability to find out whether it is mine or not. It is a very simple way, but in common English, ego is totally different. Ego is, we use some egostatic means that is a negative connotation. That means he is very proud of himself. He has unhealthy ego. So in philosophical word, ego is totally different. By ego, we are able to distinguish whether that belongs to you or not. In a more complex way, Swamiji further analysis, it gives us certain, a part of this ego tells us then sense ego and super ego. The sense ego tells me as a commoner or a layperson, when I look at this table, I look at it as nice, smooth. That is my part of ego. Although I said before, the ego is responsible to say it is mine or thine, but it's more than that. It is not only saying mine or thine, it is also telling me a part, the perception that it is simply a nice, smooth table. Again, a part of Swamiji uses word offspring of that ego. So in that offspring of that ego, there is superego. And by that superego, although it is me, a layperson who did not learn sciences, I did not see by telescope all the astronomers are telling, but I have learned by my superego all we just talked about, that the stars are not small, and that stars are the person who is going away is not disappearing. So all these things, although I am not a scientist, although I did not know what scientist is not really teaching me, but I accepted that it is a fact. So that part of my ego is superego. So those are two words that we need to understand as we go forward. Now, with that sense ego, we see the world as sense world. So in other words, the world that we are looking at is sense world. In other words, if I'm looking at in my room, in my outside, and I'm talking to you and everything, it is my world. It is through my senses. And although I am talking to you with the knowledge of science and the knowledge as we talked about, that is also a sense world, but that sense perception I have gotten through my super ego. Okay, now he is also adding the science part of that table. Now, the science part, him being the physicist, by the time, as I already told you, Swami, when he lectured, he is a physicist. And then this is how he is explaining the superego part of our mind. Now, what he's saying here is that the table, that inert table, which is looking at, if you look at it, what the scientist telling us, the scientist interprets our table, which is apparently continuous from side to side and from corner to side, is discontinuous. It is not continuous. He further tells us the apparently continuous table is a peculiar discontinuous system. Continuous system consists of atoms, extremely small, invisible to the eye, and the atoms in turn consist of electrons, neutrons, protons, etc. We learn from them that each atom is in a way minute solar system having the nucleus as a central sun and the electrons as the planets. The electrons, we are taught, spin around their axis and revolve at a terrific speeds around the nucleus of the atom. We learned that there exists a space between the protons and electrons, and between the electrons and electrons in a single atom. Again, a space-dash lattice is said to be between the atoms in a single molecule. It is out of such molecule that the table is said to be composed of. Thus, our table is not, as it appears, to be a continuous single entity from side to side and corner to corner. The table, which is seemingly dull and inert, is an aggregate of certain minute units which have terrific speeds. Such is said to be the actual structure of the whole of the physical universe. It is that evident that the truth is different from appearance. So let us go back for a minute what Swami is lecturing. So this continuous, that what appears to be in a table consists of atoms, protons, electrons, nucleus. And the atoms are going through terrific speed. And very interestingly, there is a space between the atoms. And so what we think is a continuous table is not continuous anymore. There is actually space which we are not appreciating with our eye. Only the physicist, the nuclear physicist, is telling us that. So what we are seeing with your eye is not completely true. What the physicist is telling us, we are learning through our not sense ego, through our super ego. So a layman, without knowledge of their sense ego, if somebody tells us this is full of atoms and electrons, it is hard for him to grasp. But we all know that it is a fact. So how does the physicist or the scientist is able to explain to us, a layman, to us, to me, a layman, to my superego, how is he explaining it to me? The scientist cannot show me to my sense ego. He can show me through his superego, through my superego. But he cannot convince me through my sense ego. So what he's trying to tell me is explaining to me through a series of complex mathematical equations. And these equations are purely synthetical. And these are not sought to be in a series of sense experiences, but only in series of superego. So what scientist is telling us, and it is all true, I'm able to grasp that through my superego. And how is he doing that? He's doing that through some complex mathematical equations. So all these advanced sciences are through complex mathematical equations. So what is it? Why is he talking all this? What is this all about yoga? Now, so it is evident that picture of real world and expressions related to inheritance is contradictions to the sense world, So everything is contradictions, and in expressions, the outcome are the outcomes of the superego. Now, thus, we have the subjective series, which constitute the superego, and correlate with the objective series of unit events represented as protons, electrons, and web of space-time. Allow me to explain this sentence. So what is happening is here, we know that this table consisting of atoms, nucleus, atoms, protons, electrons, and also a space lattice. And these also, some of them are running through terrific speeds. They have tremendous energy. So these are the objective series. They're all going through constantly. And these are considered to be unit events. These are happening at tremendous speeds. And these are explained by superegos. So all these are called the subjective series, are converted into the objective series of unit events. So the objective series of unit events is part of the superego. Okay, now let us go forward. So from this epistemology consideration, that is the knowledge, the philosophical knowledge considerations, we have learned the sense world is but an appearance. So what have we learned so far? That the world that we are looking at is nothing but, it's a sense world that we are grasping through our sense world. It is nothing but representation. It is representation by our senses, but it does not constitute a real world. That it is an offspring of sense world. So this world is representative of my senses, and that is called sense world. And the so-called real world, please note that here it is so-called real world. This real is small r. The real is, will come to later, is capital R. That's why he said the so-called real world. The so-called real world, as explained to us by the physicist and the scientist, which he very correctly pointed out, that this sense world is not simply a sense world, there's more to it, and that is the objective series of unit events, and that is those units are perceived by medium of senses. Again, that is, although these are superego, but again, it is going back to the sense world. So in other words, I am perceiving these atoms and electrons and protons through my sense world, which the scientist explained to me, to all complex mathematical equations, to synthetical equations, to me through my superego. So I have two egos, but both are transformed into sense world. This sense ego and superego are converted back into sense world. These are the modifications. That's the externalization, and these became objectified. The externalization and the objectification and the modification takes place not by modifications themselves. Again, this is an important point to understand. Whatever is happening, nothing is happening to those table as to the layman, neither to the electrons, the protons, or anything. Nothing is happening to them. It is all the modifications by our senses. So everything is my subjective modification. So either I am looking at the table as a smooth table, either I am looking as discontinuous, complicated as science, as protons, electrons, with space lattice, discontinuous, complex table. Both are completely my modifications. Now, the sense world thus to exist in the web of space-time as the object and sense ego of the subject. So everything is the subject. So it is me through my sense ego and the superego, and the objects are transcended, and the subjective series of superego is there to be operated upon the correlative to catch the glimpse of the picture of the so-called real world, or in other words, the objective series of the unit events. Still remember, he's still using the small r. So through these small words, through this, now I'm able to look at the universe in a totally different perspective. Either I'm looking at the table because of my sense world, and because of my superego and sense ego, I'm looking at the universe in a totally different perspective. So these are objectified by modifications, not by the objects themselves. So everything is happening in me, the subject. The so-called real world is, again, what he's saying, we're thinking it's all the real world. We are thinking the stars we are seeing at a different world, and this object we're thinking it's a real world. So the so-called real world is in fact a system of transformation of the subject series of superego, whose objective counterpart is the objective series of unit events. When there is purely a function of subjective series of superego, and that is a glimpse of picture of so-called real world, the sense world loses its significance. So next time, when we look at the star, so we look at the star in a different world, then our sense world loses its significance. So that does not mean you don't see it, but we see it in a different world. Then we think that is the real world. So, as the sense world is only the system of the modifications of the subjective of the sense ego, and the picture of the objective series of unit events is only a system of transportation of the subjective series of superego, the real existence is neither sense ego, nor the sense world, neither the superego, nor the picture of the objective series of the events. So this is all this way explanation is to lecture us, is to give us this information. The real existence is limited neither by the modifications of the series of sense ego, nor by the sense ego, and is conditioned neither by transformation of the series of superego, nor by the superego, nor by the superego. The real existence being, okay, hold on now 1 second, let's go back. The real existence is limited neither by the modifications of the sense ego, or nor by condition, neither by the transformations. Okay, go to the next sentence. The real existence being illimitable, unconditioned as infinite. Okay, is infinite and absolute. It is infinitely supreme. Okay, let's give a break here. Now, what is real existence? Okay, so give me 1 second to give me. Now, so far we learned that the world that we are seeing, either by sense ego or by superego, either by our naked eye or our jnanendriyas, or by our analysis or scientific knowledge, this is our real world by small r. Now, there is a real world with capital R. What is that? That real world with a capital R, there are several names to it. One, reality, Atman, Brahman, and many other names. And that reality, that Atman is one, it is non-dual, it is unchangeable, it is eternal, it is infinite, and it cannot be perceived by jnanendriyas. Let me repeat. The reality, which is opposite of what we call this small real world, that is the small r, there is something beyond that. And what is that? And that is a reality with a capital R. It is unchangeable, it is eternal, it is infinite existence is the reality called, and it is the only one. That is from chapter 1 of Purna Sutras, the first 3 sutras of Purna Sutras written by Swami Jnanananda. So what is this? So he is telling us this cannot be perceived by jnanendriyas. So their world, the real small r world, so how do we know? Do we have to take it from somebody who is taking it? That's what the next thing is all about. So so he's defining what is the real existence. So here, please note, the real is with a capital R, the existence is a capital E, the being illimitable, unconditioned is infinite and absolute. So actually it should be capital A. It is infinitely supreme. Unlike a layman, the philosopher does not rest satisfied with the sense world, and unlike a scientist, he is not contented with the marvelous picture of the objective series of the unit events. So the layman is, unlike a layman, the philosopher is not satisfied with either himself, what he sees in the sense world, or what he goes above and beyond. So let's read this. Unlike a layman, the philosopher does not rest satisfied with the sense world, and unlike a scientist, he is not contented with the marvelous picture of the objective series of unit events. He understands the series of sense ego in the sense world and series of superego objective series of unit events. He, however, does not remain there, but wishes to soar high into the regions beyond the modifications of the series of sense ego, as well as the transformations of the superego. Therein, the series of sense ego and that superego find their solace and the sees in that solace. There, where there is no longer here, then, when there is no longer a when, and there is, there is a no when, here, and there is absolute divine in unfalsified existence. The realization of the absolute divine in unfalsified existence is the outcome of the transcendence. So, this is what they sense. So, what he is teaching us. So, the real world, with a capital R, the real existence, which we cannot perceive with our sense world, either by sense world or by the scientist who is explaining us, the philosopher or a yogi goes above and beyond, he soars high above and beyond to find out their real existence, where the sense world as well as the sense ego as well as the superego, the objectification of the superego, when this is transcended, and they're hushed, and they're taken to they're restrained. That's why we go back to the word restraint of subjective modifications. If I can go back to the definition, the first word we used, this is where the restraint comes, or nirodha comes. When these are hushed, both sense ego and superego are hushed, and both the objective series and the unit are hushed, then when you believe it or not, whether you ignore it or not, forget about it. If you can say, I don't believe it, okay, don't believe it. You ignore it, okay, you ignore it. But it is there, ever shining in unfalsified existence and glory. It is ever there to be realized by restraining modifications of the subjective series of sense ego and transformation of the subjective series of superego, so the transcending of the sense ego and subjective series of superego. Well, you may deny all this stuff because I'm not saying it. The scientist, with all his knowledge, with all his telescopes, with all his travels to the world, to the Mars and all that stuff. And he's telling us this is the real world, this is the universe. And so that's what, there is something beyond that, whether you can ignore it, you can say it, but it is there in an unfalsified existence. The realization of the absolute divine in unfalsified existence is the outcome of transcendence. So how do you do that? Okay, is Swamiji just saying it? All those Maharishis who has given us all this wisdom, are they saying just in writing some books and teaching us? How did they get this knowledge? By transcendence. The transcendence or the modifications of the subjective series of the sense ego and or the transformations of the subjective series of superego is accomplished by restraining them. It is in such restraint that there is a realization of the absolute divine in unfalsified existence, for the sense object and the objective series of unit events are hushed. Whether you believe it or not, whether you ignore it or there is ever shining unfalsified existence, glory, it is ever there to be realized by the restraining modifications, subjective series, and the superego. So this is all this thing. So what is so far, what have you learned? What have we learned? So we have learned that what we are saying by our senses, is the sense ego, then there is superego, and we are seeing the world, which is also called by name Maya, and in English it is called perceptual universe, the word used by Swamiji. So this perceptual world is how we perceive this world, and there is a reality which is above and beyond the concept, which is cannot be perceived by Jnanendriyas, which is named by, it is actually nameless, but it is the reality. It is only one. It is Atman or Brahman. And this is realized. This cannot be comprehended or realized by Jnanendriyas. You have to go above and beyond to realize that. And that is realized by a process called yoga. So that is what this introduction is all about by the lecture, Philosophy of Yoga. But he is teaching us to understand the word yoga, what yoga means, why we need yoga in a philosophical term, to understand that in a very analytic way of yoga, why we need yoga. So again, what is the purpose of yoga? You are transcending the subjectivity, objectivity above and beyond by restraining modifications. So how do we restrain? By a process called yoga. And he again gives the process. How do we do that? So Swamiji is telling us there is one above and beyond, and above this small R world, there is a real R world. So how do you do that? Okay, one word, because in this satsanga, there are many scientists. So there are many scientists for their benefit. I always quote one beautiful research done in United States of America in a very famous university, University of California at Los Angeles, one of the premier universities of the world. And one physicist took up a project whereby the hydrogen atoms, he was able to measure their energy. Don't ask me the details of physics, because it is beyond my expertise or even my grasp. The reality of the study says, when the hydrogen atoms get agitated during our process of activity, that's how we get our energy. The atoms release an energy during our activity. However, when we can get that atoms to their ground state, everything has ground state. The entire universe, the entire chemistry, all those molecules, everything has a ground state. If we are able to take the hydrogen atoms to ground state, everything is different. So then there won't be any energy. There may be energy, but it is in a very small. To give an example, how we can take it to the energy level, cut it down. If you measure the energy level by that hydrogen atom during the deep sleep, it goes down a very little. even measured, I think, if I'm not mistaken, under anesthesia. It goes down, the energy level of that goes down some more, but very little. However, if you can get down into transcendental state, it almost gone to ground state. That is what our Maharishis do. They can take that, their energy level, their brains, their entire body to a ground state. That's how they get that knowledge, which is not possible by our mathematical equations or by our microscopes. So they don't have all those instruments, but they're able to give us this knowledge. So in order to get that knowledge or attain, you may call nirvana, you may call reality, or you have to go through the stages. The stage is yoga, so you have to transcend our brain, the so-called brain, our faculties through which we operate. We have to calm it down. We have to take it to the ground state. We have to cut down all these modifications. So in order to do that, we have to go through that process. And these Maharishis gave us through different forms of yoga. These yogas are Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Swami added Purna Yoga. So with this processing go by, as our mind is calmed down, and we can take our brain to ground state and realize that absolute, what Maharishi is telling us, what the true reality is. And as we go through our lectures, in the next 5 lectures, we can go through the details. But this is an introductory level, introductory lecture of Swamiji. As I told you, this is 80 pages in big print, and small print is 30 pages. We have covered probably about 10-15 pages, but we go through slowly. And I'm sorry, I'm not able to make it as clear as one possibly could, because it's a deep subject. I am not please pardon me for my limited knowledge and ignorance, but I'm trying my level best. So we'll continue these conversations, and tomorrow we'll continue these lectures in a little bit more in Telugu and others. So please join us again every Saturday for next 6 weeks. We'll complete this lecture. Again, this lecture was sponsored by a professor of philosophy at Agra University in 1937, and by Professor Atreya. And after this lecture, he said, Swami Jnanananda is the only one who could synthesize the real knowledge from science perspective as well as yoga perspective. And so we are fortunate to have this available to us. So let us enjoy this. And again, we'll meet next week. Thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next week. And our next portion of this Satsanga is Dhyanam. Again, this is a continuation of Swamiji's teaching us. Dhyanam is meditation. We'll do the meditation for 20 minutes. Hopefully we can join us. So what we're doing is, let me go back 1 second since we are on the subject. Part of philosophy is also, as he said, ethics. The ethics are moral part of psychology. So the moral part or moral virtues is essential for our daily life as well as our spiritual life. So in order to give progress of our spiritual journey, of our daily life, again, all this knowledge of Swamiji's teaching is not intended for sadhakas, or it is intended for each and every one. We don't have to try to realize the absolute in the unfalsified glory, but by practicing this, we'll have health, peace, and happiness, and ability to go through our daily life. So much of dukkha as enunciated by Lord Buddha. So this is the pathway to control our desires, to control our mind, and to be able to go through our daily life. So that is the purpose of these satsangas, to help us survive and reduce our dukkhas and sufferings. So, having said that, we always read our moral virtues. This is part of our yama and niyamas. That is class of what we know from our part of Raja Yoga. And ahimsa, that is, we do not himsa with no cruelty, either by word or deed. Then satya, so we always speak satya. Brahmacharya. Then aparigraha, do not accept gifts. And asteya, non-stealing. These are the most important virtues that we have to practice all the time. So let us remember those moral virtues in our daily life and practice as much as possible in the true spirit of those things that are taught to us from our ancestors. Now we practice silent meditation, and let us, those people who can sit on the floor. Those who cannot sit, in the chair, in the spine erect, the feet touching the floor, and hands on the thighs, and relax our body. I think most of our satsang understand this process. So they understand English, so we are okay. I try to speak both English and Telugu as much as possible. Now let us relax our body. The way to relax is focus, tell our brain, focus on our body, starting from the foot to the head. Let's focus on our feet and ankle. Just move them a little bit, toes and ankle. And then order or focus, relax. Relax our feet. Relax our ankles. Relax our legs. Relax. Relax our knees, thighs, abdomen, diaphragm, lungs, neck, shoulders, arms, hands, fingers, neck, head, straight, all relax. Whole body relax. We'll practice. Try to control our thoughts. Focus on our breath. Many of our Satsang participants have their own way of dhyanam and meditation. They please do in their own way. The idea is to control our brain, control our thoughts, easier way that are taught to us by a process called pranayama, control breathing. We can use by simple deep breaths in and out. We don't have to do anything. Let everything go. You don't have to be strict on anything. Just let everything go. Just relax. Let air go in and out. While breathing in, try to bring focus on your Istadayam or a symbol of your choice, either in nature or home or anything of your choice. So when you breathe in, bring into focus, stop there for a second, then exhale. And then let it focus go through that. And don't fight the thoughts, they will come and go. So let me guide you for 10 breaths, and then you go into silence on your own. You just go through the process of breathing. Breathe in, breathe out. Hari Om Tat Sat. ముగించే ఒకసారి గాయత్రి మంత్రం చదివి అందరూ కష్టాల్లో ఉన్నారు కనుక అందరూ కూడా గాయత్రి మంత్రాన్ని ఒకసారి తలుచుకుందాం. ఓం భూర్భువస్సువః తత్సవితుర్వరేణ్యం భర్గో దేవస్య ధీమహి ధియో యో న ప్రచోదయాత్. ఓం భూర్భువస్సువః తత్సవితుర్వరేణ్యం భర్గో దేవస్య ధీమహి ధియో యో న ప్రచోదయాత్. ఓం భూర్భువస్సువః తత్సవితుర్వరేణ్యం భర్గో దేవస్య ధీమహి ధియో యో న ప్రచోదయాత్. అందరికీ